Hello everyone, I am so proud to share with you what is easily my biggest video project ever, 40 different chess traps, each one individually explained. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip around or go to a specific trap, otherwise go to this timestamp on the screen if you want to go to trap number 1. Before you skip though, this video took over 15 hours of research, recording, and editing, so if you want to see more videos like this, then make sure to like, subscribe, share this with any of your chess friends, and also make sure to comment. This will really get the algorithm pumping this video out. Also, I wanted to talk about why I picked these specific 40 traps over some other 40. Obviously, there is an infinite number of traps and another infinite more that I have no idea about, but in this video I wanted to focus on traps that are either named, the main idea of an opening, or popular for some other reason. Obviously, it's impossible for me to know every single trap, but you can help out. If you would like to, comment the moves for some trap that I did not list in this video, and who knows, I might do it in a second video depending on how well this one does. But enough's enough, let's get into trap number 1. So for our first trap today, we have the Blackburne Shilling Gambit trap. It comes after white plays pawn to e4, and we play pawn to e5. They will play knight to f3, attacking our e-pawn, and we play knight to c6, defending it, at which point they play the move bishop to c4, known as the Italian game. Here, we play the move knight to d4, known as the Blackburne Shilling Gambit. This move hops our knight into the center, as well as undefends our e-pawn, of which they're very likely to take. And now we play the move queen to g5. This is a fork of their knight in the middle, and also their g2 pawn, and white might get too carried away here and play the move knight takes on f7, a fork of our queen and our rook, but they are now completely lost here. We play the move queen takes on g2, attacking their rook, and their only way to defend it is to play rook to f1, defending it with their king, at which point we take their pawn in e4, and now they have two options here, to block their queen or if their bishop. They're probably not going to block with their queen because then we can just take it with our knight, so instead they will play the move bishop to e2, but now we have checkmate immediately with the move knight to f3. The reason this is checkmate is this bishop here cannot take it because it is pinned to their king, and this knight checks their king where it has simply nowhere to go. It is completely boxed in by their own pieces, and yeah, they just have nowhere to go, and this is simply checkmate. So for our second trap today, we have what's probably one of the most complicated traps in all of chess, the Fischer trap for white. This one has so many branching paths that I actually made an entire video dedicated to just it if you want to see it more in depth. So it comes after pawn to e4 by white, and black plays pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense. We will play knight to f3, and they play knight to c6, one of the main lines. We break in the center with pawn to d4, they will take it, we take back. And now they play the move pawn to g6, known as the accelerated dragon variation. The point of it is to move their bishop to g7 to both pressure our knight and overall just get on the long diagonal. We will simply develop with the move knight to c3. They will fall through with their plan, bishop to g7, now double attacking your knight. And instead of just trading it off and leaving all the tension in the center, we play the move bishop to e3, keeping the tension in the center. They will develop with knight to f6, bishop to c4, castles, and we bring our bishop back to b3, known as the Fischer variation, and the trap here is if they play the move knight to a5, trying to trade off our good bishop. We play the move pawn to e5 here, attacking their knight, and it has a lot of trouble deciding where to go. It can't go to either these squares, this square, because our knight defends those. It can't go to g4 because our queen defends it, and it can't go to h5 because then they move pawn to g4, and their knight is now just simply trapped here. So the only square that it can actually go to is back to e8, at which point we have an incredible sacrifice. Bishop takes on f7. If they take it with the rook, then we have another incredible move, knight to e6, and their queen is completely trapped. Their queen simply has no squares to go to, and if they take it, then our queen goes all the way up the board, and we just take their queen. So they may try taking it with their king, seeing that now if we play the move knight to e6, they would just take it with their king, and we do not care, we play it anyways, because if they do end up taking it with their king, then after queen to d5, it is simply checkmate. Their king has to run to f5, now we sacrifice a pawn with g4, they have to take it, we play rook to g1 check. If their king goes back, then rook to g5 checkmate, so they have to go to h4, but now simply queen to g2, and there's no stopping mate on one of these squares. Their best try is to play the move pawn to d6, preventing immediate checkmate. However, simply queen to g5 check. their king goes, and now queen to g3 is simply checkmate. So for our third trap today, we have the Damiano Gambit trap for white. It comes after white plays pawn to e4, and black responds with pawn to e5. We will play knight to f3, attacking their e-pawn, and black has a few good ways of defending this pawn. Knight to c6, or pawn to d6, even knight to f6, counterattacking our e-pawn is good. However, the one bad apple here that does not defend it well is the move pawn to f6, defending the pawn like this way from our knight, and the reason it is not good is that it does not actually defend this pawn. We can just take it anyways. Now black can play queen to e7 here and not be totally lost here. However, 9 times out of 10 they will just end up taking our knight, and they are completely lost here after the move queen to h5 check. The reason that this move is so good is that they only have 2 responses, to either block it with their g-pawn or move their king up. They cannot really block with their pawn, because then we take on e5 and we will simply win their rook in the corner. So instead, the only move that they can play here is king to e7. So we will take their e-pawn. They have to go to the side. And now bishop to c4, and you can see that we are just swarming their king. Their only move to not get mated here is pawn to d5. However, if they try to run with, king to g6, then simply queen to f5 check. Their king runs all the way to h6, and now simply pawn to d4, checking their king with this bishop here. Their only way to block it is pawn to g5, and now simply pawn to h4, and we're gonna, take this pawn, and their rook gets unleashed, and this is simply checkmate in a few moves. The only way for them not to get mated, like I mentioned, is the move pawn to d5, back here, pawn to d5 after we check with the bishop, because the point of it is that after we take it, and now their king runs, there is no queen to f5 check here because their bishop is now defending that square. So we play the move, pawn to h4, threatening to push to h5 with a checkmate soon afterwards. Their only way to stop it is to push their h-pawn. And now we would love to play queen to f5 here, which would be a checkmate. However, their bishop covers, so we have the very clever move, bishop takes on b7, attacking their bishop and the rook, and this bishop here is actually just completely invincible. They cannot take it, because then queen to f5 is simply checkmate. So we're going to win this trapped rook in the corner, not to mention us also being up 2 pawns, and black's just terrible king positioning. This is completely winning for us. So for our fourth trap today, we have the Danish bird trap. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to e5, and we play pawn to d4, the center game. They will take it, and now we play pawn to c3, the Danish gambit. They will take it, and now we play the super gambit with bishop to c4. With this super gambit, as I call it, they will take it, and now we take back. And yes, we are down 2 pawns, however, for those 2 pawns, we have gotten 2 bishops that are seen across the entire board. The Danish bird trap is the move queen to g5 here, being extra greedy, seeing that now this bishop is here, it no longer defends this square, and they're trying to win this g2 pawn. The only move here that proves advantage for white is a knight to f3, baiting black to take this g2 pawn, and if they do, then they have now officially fallen to the trap and are completely lost. We play the move rook to g1, attacking this queen. It's defended by the knight, and the knight also defends this pawn, and the knight is defended by the queen. Its only escape square is going to h3, at which point we have a very nice move here. Bishop takes on f7. And they cannot actually take it, because if they do, then knight to g5, and we simply win their queen with a fork here. So their next best move is to play king to d8. Now we will take their g7 pawn with our bishop. Their only way to not lose is to take back, and now we take it, and we're threatening to win this knight here with 2 of our pieces, and this is just such a horrible position for black. The engine's best move here is actually play queen to h6 and just, completely sacrifice this knight here, because if they try to hang on with, knight to f6, then we simply play knight to g5, and we are just starting to swarm black. Their only move here to not lose immediately is play king to h6, queen to h6, but now we play knight to e6 check. They cannot take it because we are pinning this pawn to their king, so they have to run to e7, and now we have a very nice move here, bishop to h5 check. It's a discovered check with the rook here, and the rook is defended by the knight, and they only have 2 legal moves to either take this knight or take the rook, and their only way to not get mated is to actually just take the rook here, and we will just take back and be much better. However, if they do take our knight, we have one of the prettiest mating sequences I've ever seen in my life. We play bishop to g4 check, their king has to run up to e5, and now we play pawn to f4, sacrificing both of these pawns. They have to take our e-pawn, and now we play knight to c3 check, they take our other pawn, and now simply queen to d4 check, they block it with their knight, and now we just take it, and this is simply just mate in the center of the board. Every single piece works in incredible harmony here to take away every single square, and it's just incredible checkmate, and really incredible trap as well. So for our fifth trap today, we have the delayed Alapin trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense. We will play knight to f3, and they play pawn to d6, just very normal Sicilian stuff. And we play the move pawn to c3 here. Notice the delayed Alapin variation, because the normal delayed Alapin variation is this c3 move, but just one move earlier. They will play the move knight to f6, attacking our e-pawn, and now instead of defending it, we play the move bishop to e2, and they actually cannot take this, because if they do, then we play the move queen to a4 check, and this is simply a fork, and they cannot do anything. They will just, probably block it, and now we just take their knight in the middle, and we're just much better. So another variation of this trap is back in this position. Instead of taking it, they can instead play knight to c6. I'll play that, knight c6, and we can actually just play the move pawn to d4 here. If they take it, then this gets into some fury where white is still better. However, the point is they can actually still not take this, because even though it looks like this knight blocks off this diagonal here, we can simply play the move pawn to d5 and force it away. So they have to move their knight, and now simply queen to a4 check once again, and we just win their knight. I actually tricked a 1900 rated player in a 10-minute game of this trap, so it works against some crazy high rated players. So for a sixth trap today, we have the Dubois Trap for black. And like the Bobby Fischer trap, this is a very complicated one with a lot of things that white can do. So I have a dedicated video to this trap if you would like to see it more in depth. So it comes after e4 by white, and we play pawn to e5, knight to f3 attacking, knight c6 defending, and white plays bishop to c4, the Italian game, at which point instead of knight to d4, we play the move pawn to f5, known as the Rousseau Gambit. This is a very legit gambit that I have my own opening video on if you would like to see it. I do recommend it, it's very strong. But the trap here comes if white plays the very solid move pawn to d3. We'll simply develop here with bishop to c5, and now white tries to get into f7 here with the move knight to g5, trying to get in here, defended by the bishop, and simply fork us. Here we play what is known as the Dubois variation, and we completely ignore this threat and play the move pawn to f4. Now, obviously, white is going to drop their knight into f7, forking us, obviously, and this looks like it's completely losing for black. However, it is not. We play the move queen to h4, and we threaten and checkmate. So they can obviously, not take this. And the trap here, or, technically, they're only completely losing here if they play the move castles here, which almost everybody's plays. And now we simply develop with knight to f6. And if they take a rook, which I think about 95% of people do, then simply knight to g4. We start threatening checkmate here. Their only way to stop it, other than just sacking the queen, is to play pawn to h3, at which point we take on f2 of our knight. They have to take back and sacrifice her rook, since if they play something else, then simply knight takes on h3, double check, their king moves, and now knight to g1 is just simply a checkmate. So they have to sacrifice it with, rook takes on f2 here. We'll take it for queen. And now the king has two options on where to go, and both lose in very nice ways. The first one is king to h1. If they play this, then we play the move pawn to f3 here. They cannot take it with their queen, because then this is mate. So you have to take it with this pawn, because we are threatening our own checkmate. But now simply pawn to d5, and, if they take it, then, we get enough for our bishop, and either way we're going to get in with our bishop, and then this bishop too, along with the queen, and then we can even move our knight if we want. This is completely losing for them. And the other move that they can play back here is king to h2, at which point we have a very nice move here, pawn to d5 first, they will take it, And now, one of the most incredible moves I've ever seen, I'm not even joking here, bishop to g4, such a savage move. And the thing is, they're completely lost here, and they're going to end up losing this queen. They cannot take it here, because then queen to h4 is simply checkmate. They cannot take it with their queen, because then queen to g1 is simply checkmate. And they cannot even move their king or their queen back to try and be really defensive, because then queen to g3 is checkmate. And everything else they try doing is also losing. So for our 7th trap, we have the Elephant Trap for black. It comes after white plays pawn to d4, and we respond with pawn to d5. They will play pawn to c4, and we respond with pawn to e6. The queen's gambit declined. We'll play knight to c3, and we play knight to f6, very normal stuff. And they play bishop to g5, pinning our knight to our queen. Now we play the move knight to d7, protecting our knight with another knight. However, white here might think that we have just blundered a pawn with c takes on d5, e takes on d5, and knight takes on d5. And it looks like we cannot take back, because then we would just, lose our queen. However, this is actually not the case. We can just take their knight anyways. And before you call me stupid, the reason this works is that after they take our queen, we do not take back. Instead, we play this intermediate move, bishop to b4 check. We check their king, and despite having all these pieces, the only legal move they have is to block their queen on d2. So we will take it, they take back, and now we take their bishop. And you see here, they only have these 2 pieces, but we have these free, so we have just 1 piece here, and are much better. So for our 8th trap, we have the Englund Gambit Trap for black. It comes after white plays pawn to d4, and we respond with pawn to e5, the Englund Gambit. They will take it, and we play knight to c6, trying to win it back. They will play knight to f3, defending it. And we play queen to e7, now adding 2 attackers, so we're threatening to win it. They will play bishop to f4, adding 2 defenders, so now we're no longer threatening to win it. And we play the move queen to b4, a triple fork of their king, their bishop, and their b2 pawn. And now they can save both their bishop and their king by playing bishop back to d2. We will take their b2 pawn, and now white here might think that they can save this rook that's currently hanging with the move bishop to c3, because it looks like that they're now defending this rook here, and the knight defends the bishop, and the rook defends the knight, and they have this nice little chain here. However, white is now completely losing with the move bishop to b4. Now they are no longer threatening to take our queen, because it is pinned to their king, and white only has 2 main responses here that both immediately lose. If they take our bishop, then we will simply take it back with our knight, and now they can no longer stop the dual threats of us taking their rook and us taking their c2 pawn with a c2 pawn with a fork, and then us winning the rook. And their other main response that they have here is to play queen to d2, because it looks like after we take their bishop and they take back their queen, that they once again get this nice little chain here, and that everything is fine for them. However, everything is not fine, because the move queen to c1 is just checkmate. For our 9th trap, we have the Englund Gambit Premove Trap that is once again for black. So it comes after white plays d4, and once again we play pawn to e5, the Englund Gambit. They will take it, and instead of playing knight to c6, we instead play the move bishop to c5. They will play knight to f3, just developing, and we play the move pawn to d6. And the tip here is that they are almost always going to take this pawn, but before they take it, you're going to pre-move the move knight to e7, because after they take it, now we have pre-moved this move knight to e7, and white here will think, oh, we just, blundered a knight with a dumb pre-move. Now they will just take her knight, and it looks like they're completely winning. However, we have a very nice tactic here to win. Bishop takes on f2. White here only has 1 legal move, which is to take our bishop, but after they do that, now that their king is on this square, is no longer defending their queen, so we can just take it. And now we're up a queen for 2 pieces, and much better. So for the big number 10, we have the Fajarowicz Trap for black. It comes after white once again plays pawn to d4, and we play the move knight to f6, comes the Indian game. White will play pawn to c4, and we play pawn to e5, the Budapest Gambit. Now they're going to take our pawn, and the main move here is knight to g4, which is the Budapest defense. However, we will play the move knight to e4 here, known as the Fajarowicz variation. Now, one of the main ideas of play we have here for black is to move bishop to b4 check, so white will prevent this with the move pawn to a3, and we play pawn to b6, the Bonsdorf variation. And white here might think that we've blundered a fork, with queen to d5, a fork of our knight, and a rook. However, this is all part of our plan, and we play the move bishop to b7 here, completely sacrificing this bishop. They will obviously take it, and now you play knight to c6, and we are starting to trap this queen here. We are already threatening knight c5, which would just trap the queen, or maybe even in the future, if we can't play that, pawn to a6 and rook to a7 ideas, which should also trap the queen. So almost everybody here plays the move queen to a6, trying to, get their queen out of this very bad spot, but this is actually a completely losing move because we have now trapped their queen after the move knight to c5. Their only safe square is queen to b5, and now simply pawn to a6, and this queen is completely trapped. These squares are taken up by this knight, these squares are taken up by this knight. This pawn attacks the queen, this pawn is protected, and both these knights are also protected. And this pawn is its own, and as you can see, this queen is just completely trapped here, so they were going to be forced to sacrifice it, at which point we just take back and are much better. So for our 11th trap, we have the fishing pole trap for black. And before I get into this one, I just want to say that the fishing pole trap it does have a few versions of it. I'm just showing you the Ruy Lopez version. However, there's also one for the Sicilian defense and the Stafford Gambit. So it comes after white plays pawn to e4 and we play pawn to e5. White will play knight to f3, attacking this pawn. We play knight to c6, defending it. And they play bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. We will play knight to f6, the Berlin defense. White will castle here, and we play the odd-looking move knight to g4. White here will probably think we're just being stupid and play the move pawn to h3, just trying to kick our knight away. But instead of moving the knight, we instead play the move pawn to h5, sacrificing our knight. However, they can actually not take it. If they take it, they're losing, because we will take back, and now white here will almost always move our knight. Their only safe square is back to e1, and now simply queen to h4, and checkmate is unstoppable, because we are threatening to go to either of these two squares, defended by the rook, and there's just no way that they can stop it. Their best try is to play the move pawn to f3. However, we do not check and let them run away. Instead, we play the move pawn to g3, defending the square, and they simply cannot do anything. It does not matter what move they play here. Queen to h1 or queen to h2 is simply checkmate. Our 12th trap is the Flagship Trap for white. It comes after white plays pawn to e4 and black responds with pawn to e5. We will play knight to f3, they will play knight to c6, and we play pawn to c3, which is a bit of an offbeat opening. It's known as the Ponziani opening, planning to go d5 and take back with their c-pawn. Black will go knight to f6 here, attacking our e-pawn, and we completely ignore it and play pawn to d4. They will take our e-pawn, and we push all the way to d5, attacking their knight, and if they go to the side here, then simply pawn to b4, and their knight is just, you draw some arrows, their knight is just completely trapped, so their only safe square here is to drop back to e7, at which point we will simply take their e-pawn, and the trap here is if they play the supernatural move, pawn to d6, just attacking their knight, or attacking our knight, and, and now they're able to get their bishop out, and this looks very good for them. However, they are actually completely lost with the move bishop to b5 check. If they block their bishop, then we will simply take it, and after they take back their queen, remember this pesky little knight actually just defends that square as well, so we will just take it, and now we're just up a queen and much better. Their best try here is to play the move pawn to c6, we will take it, and after they take back, we will take it with our knight, and the move here is not to take this, because, I'll show it, if they take it, then here, and, you get forked, or actually triple forked even, that's cool. The move here instead is to play the move queen to b6, at which point we simply drop our knight back to d4, giving a check. They have to just walk to the side here, and now we just simply play knight to d2. And we can play these, kind of slowish moves because black just has a terrible position. It's going to take him a very long time to get settled. Meanwhile, we're up a pawn, we're about to castle, and we just have a fantastic position, despite not having a big material advantage. For our 13th trap, we have the Fool's Mate Trap for black. This one is less of an actual trap, and more just something you should know if your opponent is playing it as a meat and bullet. It comes after white plays pawn to f3, we will simply play e5, and now white plays pawn to g4, which is the worst thing that they can possibly do, and this is the fastest possible checkmate in all of chess, because queen to h4 check is simply mate. There's nothing they can do, and that's the fastest possible checkmate in all of chess. The 14th trap is the fried liver checkmate trap for white. It comes after we play pawn to e4 and black plays pawn to e5. We will play knight to f3 attacking their e-pawn, and they play knight to c6 defending it, and we play bishop to c4, the Italian game. They will play knight to f6, the two knights defense, and we play knight to g5, trying to get on this f7 square, and black will block it with pawn to d5. We will take it, and after they take back, we play the fried liver attack with knight takes on f7. This is forking their queen and their rook, so they have to take it, and now we play the move queen to f3. This is, a fork of their knight and their king, and the only move for black to not be horribly worse here is play king to e6. However, a lot of people won't play that. A lot of people will run back to g8 because they think it looks safe. However, this is actually just checkmate after, or any piece can take on d5 here, but queen takes on d5. They will take it, we take back with our bishop, and after they block, we simply take, and this king here is just simply stuck. There's no way out, and this is just checkmate. The 9th trap is the Fritz Trap, as well as a little bonus one too. It comes after the move pawn to g4. This is the Grob opening, and is definitely not recommended by computers. They will play pawn to d5, and we play bishop to g2, known as the Grob Gambit, as we are gambiting this g4 pawn. They will take it, and now you play the move pawn to c4. Now they cannot take this pawn, because then we will take on b7, and this rook is just completely trapped in the corner, and we can just, take it afterwards and be much better. That is the main trap. However, I thought that was a little lame, so I'll also show you a little bonus trap here. If I go back here, the main move in this position is to play pawn to c6 and just be solid. Here we play the move queen to b3, adding more pressure this way, as well as attacking here. They will play queen to c7, defending this. And a little trap here is if after we take their pawn, they take back, and instead of taking, we play the move knight to c3, attacking it, and black here might get a little greedy and play pawn to e6 and try to hang on as long as possible, but now we have the move queen to a4 check, a fork of their king and their bishop, so after they block, we'll simply take it, and we're much better. The 16th trap is the Frum's Gambit Queen Sacrifice Trap. It comes after white plays pawn to f4, the bird's opening, and we play pawn to e5, the Frum's Gambit. They will take it, and now we play the move queen to h4 check. Their only legal move is to block with g3, and now the tip here is before this move to pre-move bishop to e7. So after g3, we play the move bishop to e7 instantly, and white might think that, we just blundered our queen here. However, if they do take it, then we will simply take back, and this is checkmate. And I do want to acknowledge that, yes, this will probably only work at lower levels, and objectively, the computer is having a heart attack right now. However, nonetheless, it is still a trap. The 17th trap is the Halosar Trap for white. It comes after white plays pawn to d4, and black responds with pawn to d5, and we play pawn to e4, the Mortimer Gambit. Also, a little note here is you can also reach this position by playing pawn to e4 first, and if black responds with the Scandinavian defense, then we can play pawn to d4, also in that same Mortimer Gambit. So they will take your e-pawn, and you will respond with knight c3, trying to win it back. They will play knight to f6, defending it, and you play pawn to f3, willing to trade off that pawn to actually take back your queen. This is known as the Reiter Gambit, to gambit two pawns for an extreme amount of development. So they will probably accept it, at which point you play bishop to e3, just getting some more development. They will play queen to b4, trying to win this b2 pawn, and we castle. So we put our rook on the d-file here while also, defending it. And the trap here is if they play the supernatural move, bishop to g4, defended by the knight and their queen. And it looks like, they're just skewering us, and we're going to have to move the way, and we lose a rook, and this is bad for us. However, we are actually completely winning with the move knight to b5. And the reason this is so winning is that now if they take our queen, then knight to c7 is actually just checkmate, because we check their king, but their king cannot run anywhere because our rook covers these 2 squares on the d file. So their best thing to do, according to the engine here, is to play knight to a6 to try and defend this, but now we simply take their b7 pawn, and this is just a fork of their rook and their knight. And the most common move here, rook to b8, is the most common move by far, is actually just a total blunder, and this is checkmate in 2 here, with queen takes on b8, knight takes on b8, and now knight takes on c7 once again, and this is just a checkmate. There's even a third thing that they can fall for in that pretty much exact same trap. If they, I'm going to go back here. If they try to just develop a knight with a knight to d7, then once again we have this move, queen takes on b7, and if they play rook to b8, we have that same queen sacrifice checkmate with knight takes on c7. The 18th trap is the Kieninger Trap for black. It comes after white plays pawn to d4, and we respond with knight to f6, the Indian game. They will play pawn to c4, and we play pawn to e5, the Budapest Gambit. They're going to accept our gambit. Instead of playing knight to e5, the Fajarowicz variation, we play knight to g4, the Budapest defense. So they will play knight to f3, defending this pawn because we are attacking it. We will play knight to c6, adding another attacker. They will play bishop to f4, adding another defender. And we play bishop to b4 check. Now they're going to block this knight, and they don't really want to go here, since then we could just trade and they would get a terrible pawn structure. So they will go knight to d2, at which point we go queen to e7, adding another attacker here, and now they actually just can't defend it. So what a lot of times they're going to do is play pawn to a3 and try to counterattack our bishop. And here we have the rather surprising move, knight takes on e5, completely ignoring our bishop, but the reason is that if they take it, then knight to d3 is actually just checkmate. They cannot take back because this pawn is pinned to their king, and their king, once again, has just 0 spaces to go to. The only thing that you need to remember in this trap is that if they see right through it and end up trading on this e5 square, we will take back, and after they take, you do not want to take back immediately, because then they will just take here, and now we actually are just down a piece. Instead, you want to take on d2 with check first, so then they take back, and now we take the bishop, and this is just an even position. The 19th trap is the King's Gambit Queen Trap for white. It comes after e4, e5, and pawn to f4. This is the King's Gambit. They will take it, and now you play bishop to c4, the Bishop's Gambit, and after they check on h4 with their queen, we will simply slide over because we don't really want to push this pawn because then they could take. So after we slide over, they'll play bishop to c5, threatening a checkmate here. We will prevent it with pawn to d4. Now they will slide back their bishop to b6, and we play knight to f3, trying to attack their queen and get it to move away, where we can now take this pawn because the queen is defending it. So they will back up to h6, being very greedy, just trying to hang on to this pawn as long as possible, at which point we play pawn to g3. They cannot take it because it is pinned to their queen, and we're also adding another attacker here. But they can trade off the pawn with queen to h3 check, at which point we'll run up to f2 for king. But the trap here is if they get really greedy and just try to trade off their pawn and solidify a 1-pawn advantage, but they're actually completely lost here after we will simply take back. The queen defends the rook, and the rook attacks the queen and this entire file here. So the queen's only safe square is back to g4, but now we win with bishop takes on f7. If they take it, then simply knight to e5 check. It's just a fork of their king and queen, so we will just win their queen. And if they don't take it, they slide over to f8, then simply rook up to h4, and the queen is completely trapped. Every single square is covered here, so they will simply have to sack their queen, at which point we will just take back and are much better. For the big number 20 trap, we have the King's Gambit Classical Trap for black. It comes after pawn to e4 and pawn to e5, and white plays f4, the King's Gambit, and we play bishop to c5, the classical variation. And the main trap here that a lot of beginner players will fall for is simply taking our e-pawn here, since it looks like we don't defend it, which we don't. However, we have something called tactical defense, because if they do end up taking it, then simply queen to h4, and white is completely lost. If they run up their king, then we take on e4 is checkmate, so they have to block with pawn to g3, but now we take on e4 anyways. This is just a fork of their king and their rook, so after they block, we will take on h1, and now we're just up a rook and completely. For the 21st trap, we have the Lasker Trap for black. This is another very complicated one that I happen to have an entire video on if you want to see it more in depth. So it comes after white plays pawn to d4, and we respond with pawn to d5. They'll play pawn to c4, the queen's gambit, and we respond with pawn to e5, the Alapin counter gambit. They will accept our counter gambit by taking our e-pawn, and we'll push to d4. They will immediately try to trade off our pawn with pawn to e3, at which point we will play bishop to b4 check, and after they block with their bishop, we do not care that our bishop is hanging, we take on e3, completely sacrificing our bishop, and if they take it, then they are now completely losing. The reason this is losing is that first of all, we will take on f2. Now they cannot take this, because then we will simply take their queen, so they have to run up to e2 to keep the defense of this queen, and we only have one winning move in this position. First of all, we can't play bishop to g4 and skewer here, because then they can simply block with their knight, and if we take it, then they will just take back their pawn, and white is completely fine here, in fact winning according to the engine. So instead of that, oops, I kind of spoiled it there. Instead of that, we need to get rid of this knight by taking it, but we do not promote into a queen, because if we promote to a queen, it's not fast enough, it's not in check, so they can just trade off queens here, and after we take back, now they will take our queen, and this is just a dead even position. Instead, as I kind of spoiled it there, we will take, but not promote to a queen, promote to a knight, because it is check. So now yes, if they take back, then now we get bishop to g4, because there's no knight to block here, so they have to move to the side, and we will simply take their queen, and now we're just up a queen and much better. The only thing that they can try to do is step back to e1 to keep the defense of their queen, at which point our knight is just kind of stuck here. And I do show in my more dedicated video to this how black is actually winning here. For the 22nd trap, we have the Legal Trap for white. It comes after e4, e5, knight to f3, attacking their e-pawn, and they play pawn to d6 to fill their defense. We will play bishop to c4, and they respond with knight to c6. You know, very normal developing stuff. We will play knight c3, and now they play bishop to g4, pinning our knight to our queen. We will play pawn to h3, attacking their bishop, and they're very unlikely to trade here. What they're much more likely to do is back up to h5 and keep this pin here. However, this pin here is not an absolute pin, and what I mean by that is that we can still actually move this knight if we wanted to, which is exactly what we do here with the beautiful move knight takes on e5. Now, first off, if they end up taking our queen, then we actually have checkmate after bishop takes on f7. Their only squared move to is up to e7, but simply now knight to d5, and every single square is covered here. All our pieces just work in beautiful harmony. Yeah, it's just really, really nice there. The other two things that they can do is to take this with their pawn. If they do this, then we'll simply take their bishop, and we're just cleanly up a pawn. And if they take it with our knight, this is the most scary option, because it looks like after they take our knight and we take their bishop, it looks like they're actually just winning here, because then they take our bishop. But not to worry, because our queen slides all the way across the board, and queen to b5. Oh my god, I say across? Oh my god, I sound like a baby. We have queen to b5. This is a fork of their king and their knight, so they will simply have to block, and then we will just take their knight, and now we're cleanly up a pawn. The only thing that you have to remember is that this move pawn to h3 here is very important, because if we try the move knight takes on e5 here, yes, if they take our queen, then we still have the same checkmate, but now they can take on e5 with their knight. Oh, sorry, now they can take on e5 with their knight, and it defends the bishop, and now we're actually just down a piece here and losing. The 23rd trap is the Leonhardt Gambit trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to d5, the Scandinavian defense. We will take it, they will take back their queen, and we play knight c3, attacking their queen, so they have to move it. The main line here is queen to a5, and now we play pawn to b4. This is known as the Leonhardt Gambit, which is gambiting this b-pawn for some future pressure on this b-file. Obviously they will take it, and now we play one of the more tricky lines here, knight to b5. We are attacking this c7 pawn, which would obviously be a fork of this rook and king, and this might seem like a really elementary little threat, but I promise you this is going to get very advanced very quick. they will play queen to e5, defending this pawn, defending the pawn and defending the fork, at which point we play the very seemingly, not tricky move, bishop to c4. It's a very normal developing move. And I think when I looked at this trap, I think it was 43% of people here play either pawn to c6 or pawn to a6 and completely blunder the game away. This is actually a complete blunder. Even though it seems so natural, just taking our knight, how could this be bad? But we are actually completely winning with the move bishop takes on f7. Checking their king, they will almost always take it. However, if they run away for some reason, then we will simply drop back, and this is just even material, but they cannot castle, and we have this open b file in the future, and this is just very good for us. But 9 times out of 10, they will end up taking this bishop, and now we play the move queen to h5 check. We check their king, as well as setting up an X-ray against their queen with our knight here if we ever move it, and every single move they play here loses. If they play the move pawn to g6, then knight to d6 check. We check their king, as well as open up this discovery against their queen, so they will take their knight, and now we will simply take their queen and, just up our queen here. Very similar story if they run to e6, then knight to d4 this time, so after they move, then we will simply take their queen. The only thing that they can really try here is king to f6, because we have no knight check on this king now, but now we have bishop to b2 check. We take advantage of the fact that we move the b pawn here, so now we can use the square for a bishop. If they go here, then once again we just have some knight checks, so they will probably block it with pawn to e5. We'll simply take it with our bishop, and after they walk to the side, here is the only other legal move, and this also loses to the same move. After they move to the side, now simply knight c7 check. We are forking their rook and their king, and if they actually move here, which are their only two legal moves, then queen to e8 is actually just checkmate. So their only move to not get checkmated is to take our knight, but now we will simply just take back for our bishop, and we're just up a queen for 2 pieces and completely winning. The 24th trap is the Magnus Smith trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense. We will play knight to f3, and they play pawn to d6, and we'll continue with main line for a few moves. Pawn to d4, they will take it, we take back for knight. They'll play knight to f6, attacking our e-pawn, we play knight c3, defending. And after they play knight c6, which is the classical variation, we will play bishop to c4, the Sozin attack. They will play pawn to g6, or actually not really the dragon variation, they're preparing to fianchetto their bishop like the dragon variation. And here we initiate the trap with knight takes on c6, they'll take back their b-pawn, and now we set the trap with pawn to e5. Now black has actually not fallen into the trap. They can be completely fine here if they play something like knight to g4, and we'll simply develop with bishop to f4, and we are completely fine here as well. However, the trap here is if they take our e-pawn and say, we're stupid, that's just a free pawn. But now we win with the very nice move, bishop takes on f7. Their king, they only have one legal move because our queen covers this square from their king, which is to take it. But now that we've attracted this king away from this square, it's no longer defending this queen, so we can just take it, and we're just up a queen for a piece, and, completely winning. So for trap number 25 on our list, we have the Marshall Trap for black. This is one of those traps with 10 moves of very boring theory before we even get to the trap, so I'm just going to speed run through it as fast as I humanly can. So trap comes after white plays pawn to e4, and we respond with pawn to e5, they'll play knight to f3, attacking our e-pawn, we play knight to f6, Petrov's defense, counterattacking their e-pawn, they will take our e-pawn, we play pawn to d6, attacking their knight, they will play knight back to f3, and now we take their e-pawn, they will play pawn to d4, we solidify our knight in center, pawn to d5, they will play bishop to d3, bishop to d6, castle's castle, now they play pawn to c4, we cannot take it because then we lose our knight in the center, so instead we play bishop to g4, paying their knight to their queen, sacrificing our d-pawn, they will take it, and now we play pawn to f5, defending our knight in the center, and the trap here is if they play the move rook to e1, having more attackers than defenders on our knight in the center. Oh, that was a lot to say. But anyways, the reason this move is losing is because we have the very nice sacrifice here, bishop takes on h2. Now, the best move according to the engine is if they just slide over, and if they do this, then we'll simply drop our bishop back, and we're just, you know, up a pawn here. That's just very nice. However, almost always they will end up taking our bishop. By the way, they cannot take their knight because then they lose their queen. So yeah, they will take their king. And now we play the move knight takes on f2, a fork of their queen and their bishop. So they will move their queen. Then we will take their bishop, and after they take back, now we will take their knight, and once again, after they take back, now we have the move queen to h4. This is simply a fork of their king and their rook, so after they block the check, we'll simply just take the rook, and now we're just up a lot of material and much better. The 26th trap on our list is the Milner-Barry Gambit trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to e6, the French defense. We'll play pawn to d4, pawn to d5, and we play pawn to e5, the advanced variation. Black here will play pawn to c5, striking at our d-pawn. We will play pawn to c3, defending it, and making a nice little pawn chain here. They will play knight to c6, adding more pressure on our d-pawn. We will play knight to f3, nullifying that pressure. And now they play queen to b6, and here we play the move bishop to d3. This is the Milner-Barry Gambit. However, while it is a gambit, we are actually not gambiting this pawn yet. And yes, we can lose this pawn because our queen is no longer defending this pawn. So if we trade all the way here, yes, we lost a pawn here. However, it does not matter in the grand scheme of things because we win their queen with the very nice move bishop to b5. The reason this move works is that we are now revealing this attack on their queen, and we are checking in the same move. So after they slide over, now we will simply take their queen, and we're just up queen for a pawn and completely win. The 7th trap is the mirror trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, and black copies us with pawn to e5. We will play knight to f3, attacking their e-pawn, and they respond with knight to f6, once again copying us. This is known as the Petrov's defense. We will take their e-pawn, and now once again they copy us just like a mirror by taking our e-pawn. Now we play the move queen to e2 here, attacking their knight, and the trap here is if they simply move their knight back. This looks like very natural here. But now, black is already on the 4th move of the game, completely lost with a very nice move, knight to c6. The reason this move works is that is a discovered check against their king, and we are attacking their queen with our knight, and there's nothing they can do. If they block with their bishop, then we'll simply just take their queen, and we're just up a queen. And even if they try blocking with their queen, our knight does defend that square, but it also defends this square, so we will once again just take it, and after they take back, we are just completely fine here. For trap number 28, we have the Mortimer Trap. It comes after e4, e5, knight to f3, attacking the e-pawn, knight to c6, defending it, and bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. We will play knight to f6, the Berlin defense. They will play pawn to d3, and here we play knight to e7. This is known as the Mortimer variation, or it might be Mortimer, I might be pronouncing that wrong. And the point of it is to reroute the knight to g6. However, there's also a trap here. If they play the move knight takes on e5, just taking our center pawn, they're now losing here, because we have the move pawn to c6. Now we are attacking their bishop, so they have to move it, preferably back to c4, and a white player here will probably just see this fret and go, "Ooh, fret, I'm going to win!" But now we win with the move queen to a5, and this is simply a fork of their knight and their king, so they will have to block it, probably with their bishop, and now we just take their knight, and we're just up a knight for a pawn, and much better. For the 29th trap, we have the Noah's Ark Trap for black. It comes after e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5, once again, Ruy Lopez. And one of my favorite things about the Ruy Lopez opening is how every single time you make a move, it's called a different variation. Like, here for example, this is the Ruy Lopez, right? Pawn to a6, Morphy defense. Now it's a Columbus variation. Now it's the Caro variation. And after bishop back to b3, now you play pawn to d6, and white will strike in the center with pawn to d4, and now it's the modern Steinitez defense. But anyways, back on track. We will take their d-pawn with our knight. They will take it, we take back, and the trap here is if they simply take back. looks so natural, right? But now white is actually going to end up losing this bishop with the move pawn to c5, aiming to go to c4 and completely trap this bishop. White's best chance here is to go queen to d5, attacking both checkmate and our rook in the corner. However, we are still winning here with the move bishop to e6. Now defending this rook with our queen and attacking their queen and preventing the checkmate. So they will probably check on c6. Now we will simply come back for bishop to d7, attacking their queen once again. And after they go back to d5, now that this rook is no longer hanging, we can successfully play the move pawn to c4. And they will have to sacrifice their bishop for 2 pawns, so not the biggest advantage in the world, but after a simple knight to f6, we are already much better here. Plus a little bonus trap here, if white tries to castle, we have the move bishop to b5, and we skewer their queen and the rook. Just a nice little extra trap. Trap number 30 is the Rubinstein Trap for white. It comes after d4, d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and pawn to c4, the queen's gambit. Black here will play pawn to e6, the queen's gambit declined. We have bishop to g5, pinning, knight to d7, pawn to e3, bishop to e7, very normal stuff here. Very normal developing. Knight to c3, castles, rook to c1 now, rook to e8, queen to c2. Now then black here plays the move pawn to a6. We will take their d pawn with our pawn. They will take back. We play bishop to d3 developing, preparing to castle here. Black will play pawn to c6. We will castle. And the trap here is now, or actually it's one move from now, black here will play the move knight to e4, hopping their knight in the center, as well as lining up here against our bishop. We will simply bring our bishop back. And the trap here is if black tries to solidify their knight in the center here with pawn to f5. The reason they play this is that if we take, well, now they're attacking our knight, and they get this really nice pawn chain here, as well as a nice little clump in the center. Instead, what we are going to do here, and with the move here that's completely winning, is actually to take on d5 with our knight, a move that looks impossible, but they can actually just not take back, because if they do, then bishop to c7, and this queen here is completely trapped. We attack it. It cannot move through any of its pieces, so it just has to sacrifice. At which point we take back, and we're a lot better here. We just win queen. But even if they don't take back, there are a lot of tactics here. Like if they play knight to f6, for example, a very normal move, then instead of our bishop going to c7, then we bring our knight to c7, and we get a fork here. So we're just going to win exchange along for pawn. And even in the engine's best line here, which I'll show you right now, it's bishop to d6. We will play queen to b3, and that's another advantage here. Now that the move is f-pawn up, we are going to take advantage of this weak diagonal against the king. Now they're going to take our bishop, and this is what the engine says is best. And now we get knight to f6, double check, so they have to move their king. And now we will simply take their rook. They will sack for 1 extra pawn, because they can. We will take back. And now they take our knight, and we've traded from being 1 pawn up to being an exchange up, and with a good play here, this is completely winning for white. For trap number 31, we have the Scholar's Mate or 4-move checkmate trap. It comes after e4, black plays pawn to e5, and here we play queen to h5. This attacks their e-pawn, so if they don't defend it, we're going to take it. The first little mini trap that white has here is if black plays a move pawn to g6, saying, I just don't want your queen here, then we'll simply take on e5. This is a little blind spot for a lot of beginners, as they don't see this fork here. So black will play queen to e7, blocking the check, and now we simply take the rook in the corner, and we're just up a rook and winning on move 4. Instead, they will likely play the best move, which is knight to c6 to defend this pawn, at which point we play bishop to c4. We threat in a checkmate, so if they play a very natural move like knight to f6, then we just have checkmate on the 4th move with queen takes on f7. Another thing that they can do here, other than, knight to f6 and get checkmated, the best move for them is to play pawn to g6, at which point we'll back up to f3, and we are once again threatening checkmate. So black here might play, knight to d4, see that they're getting this and this, but now once again queen takes on f7 is checkmate. However, black here can be totally fine with the move, knight to f6, but after, knight to f6 here, but after the move knight to e2, yes, black is a little better here. However, it's not like white is totally lost or anything, and we have a fine position. Trap number 32 is the Scotch 6-move checkmate trap. If you don't know why this trap is so popular, look up XQC versus Moist Critical 6-move checkmate. It comes after e4, e5, white will play knight to f3, we will defend it with knight to c6, and white here plays the move pawn to d4, the Scotch opening. We will take it, they will take back their knight, and here we play the move bishop to c5. Adding 2 attackers on this knight now, and also aiming at this f7 pawn here. White will likely defend it with pawn to c3, at which point we play the move queen to f6. We are, moving our queen out, getting very aggressive, as well as adding another attacker on this knight here. And white might get scared that we have so many attackers, and take our knight on c6. However, this completely loses, because queen takes an f7 in the 4-move checkmate style is simply checkmate. Trap number 33 is the Siberian Trap. It comes after pawn to e4, and we play pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense, and white here will play pawn to d4, the Smith-Morgan Gambit, because after we take it, they play pawn to c3, gambiting a pawn for some development. We will play knight to c6 here, they will play bishop to c4, pawn to e6, knight to f3, queen to c7. It's very normal developing stuff. White will castle here. We play knight to f6, and they play queen to e2 to connect their rooks. And here we play a very tricky move here, knight to g4, lining up on this h2 square with our knight and our queen. However, obviously we cannot take it right now because their knight defends. However, white here might get a little scared of this and just say, let's just get it out of here, pawn to h3. But here we win in beautiful fashion with the move knight to d4, an incredible tactic, and everything they do is losing. First of all, if they take our knight, then queen to h2 is just checkmate, defended by the knight, so yeah, simply checkmate. If they move their queen up, then we will simply take their knight with check, and after they take back, once again, queen to h2 is just checkmate. The only way for them are not to get checkmated, or there's a few ways, but the best way for them is to take our knight on g4, but we will simply now take their queen, and after they take back, we are simply up 2 pieces for queen, which is winning. Trap number 34 is the 6-move Caro-Kann Smothered Checkmate Trap. It comes after pawn to e4, and black plays pawn to c6, the Caro-Kann defense. We will play knight to c3, and after black strikes in center of pawn to d5, we play knight to f3, the 2 knights attack. They will take our pawn in the center, and we will take back for knight. And now black here would like to play this move, knight to f6. However, the problem if they play this is that we will just take it, and after they take back, they get this these double pawns here, and this is not really what a Caro-Kann wants, or Caro-Kann player wants in a 2 knights type of system. Instead, what they're much more likely to play is the move knight to d7, preparing this move to be able to take back with their knight. But here we play a very tricky move, queen to e2. This might look a little stupid, why are we blocking out our bishop, yada yada yada. However, the trap here is if black falls through with their plan, playing knight to f6, and instead of trading knights or something, we go the other way, knight to d6, and this is checkmate. They cannot take it because this pawn is pinned to their king, and yeah, this knight simply checks their king, which is completely stuck by its own pieces. Trap number 35 is the Stafford Gambit Checkmate Trap. It comes after e4, e5, white will play knight to f3, attacking our e-pawn, and instead of playing something like knight to c6 to defend it, we play knight to f6, the Petrovs or Russian defense, counterattacking their e-pawn, so they will take our e-pawn, and instead of playing the main line with pawn to a d6, here we play the Stafford Gambit, Eric Rosen's favorite, with knight to c6. They're almost always going to take our knight, which is also the best move. We will take back for d-pawn to open up this bishop, and white has to defend this e-pawn here. They have 2 main ways of doing that, which is knight here and pawn up. And here we're going to be looking at pawn up. Here we play the move bishop to c5, lining up on this f2 square. And the trap here is if white plays a supernatural move, bishop to g5, pinning our knight to our queen. So it looks like, we cannot move our knight, because then we would just lose our queen, and obviously that will be bad, right? Wrong. Well, yes, but wrong in this position because knight takes on e4 simply wins for black. There are only three main options for white here, which is to take, or to come back with the bishop. If they take our queen, then we have checkmate after bishop takes on f7, king's only square is to go up, and now bishop to g4 is a skewer checkmate. And if you saw the Legal Trap, this is very similar to that, in which three minor pieces work in harmony to take away every single square from the opposing king. So now, if they end up taking our knight, then we will play bishop takes on f2, and we will end up winning their queen. If they take it, then we win their queen right away, so white might try to play king to e2 to keep the defense of this, but now simply bishop to g4, skewering. Now they have to take our bishop, and we just take their queen. One little important note here, do not take with the bishop, because remember, our queen is still under attack here. If we play this, then we are actually just losing here. So remember to take with your queen, and you're completely fine here. The last and best line for them that is still completely losing is to play bishop back to e3. This is winning because after we take their bishop and they take back, now we have this move queen to h4 check, and we take advantage of the fact that this f-pawn is not here anymore, and this diagonal here is very weak. If they go up, then queen to f2 is simply checkmate, so they have to block with their g-pawn here, and we will simply take it with our knight. And they can't take back because it is pinned to their rook. So if they take back, then we will simply take their rook, and if they try moving their rook out of the way, if they try moving the rook out of the way, then now we take advantage of this discover attack here with knight to e4. Once again, if they move up, then queen to f2 is checkmate, so their only move to not get checkmated is rook to g3. But here, now we simply will take it, and this variation we also win an extra pawn, along with black having to run their king to d2, which is just terrible. Trap number 36, we have the Tal Trap. It comes after pawn to e4 by us, and black plays pawn to c6. We will play pawn to d4, they'll respond with pawn to d5, and here we play pawn to e5, the advanced variation. Black will play the main line, bishop to f5, and here we play this very important, or not really important, but trappy move, pawn to h4. The reason we play this is that if this bishop ever has to drop back here, we can push it all the way up to h5, and that's what this exact trap takes advantage of. In every other line for black in the advanced Caro-Kann, black will end up playing this move pawn to e6, so it's very natural here if black just, blitzes out this move pawn to e6. However, this is actually now completely lost for black, because we just win this bishop here with the move pawn to g4, defended by their queen, or by our queen, and simply everything they do is losing. If they back up, then now we push our h-pawn all the way up, attacking this bishop. If they try moving to the center, then we move our f-pawn. And this bishop is now simply stuck, so the best thing to do is just sacrifice it, at which point we take back, and now we just want a bishop for a pawn, which is much better. For trap number 37, we have the Tarrasch Trap. It comes after e4, e5, knight to f3, attacking their e-pawn, knight to c6, defending it, and bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez opening. Black here will play pawn to a6, attacking our bishop, they will back it up to a4, they will play knight to f6, castles, they will take our e-pawn, and we play pawn to d4, striking in the center. They will play pawn to b5, counterattacking our bishop, and after we back up to b3, they will play pawn to d5. Now, obviously, we will take their e-pawn. They will play bishop to e6, developing, pawn to c3, bishop to e7, rook to e1, castles, and here we play an important move with knight to d4. Now, this attacks their knight, so they have to make a decision. If they take our e-pawn, then simply pawn to pawn to f3, and then black kind of gets murdered here with this hanging knight behind this knight that's attacked. And Engine can find some way to equalize. For a person, you really can't. If they take our knight, then simply we will take back, and now we get this nice little clump in the center, and this just doesn't look too good for black here. So a lot of people here will play the move queen to d7, just defending their knight. But here they're completely losing with the move knight takes on e6. Now this might look really simple. Don't they just take back? How is black losing here? But think closer. If they take back their f-pawn, then now this is pinned this way, so we can just take their knight. If they take back, then we'll just take their queen. And it's the same thing for the other way. If they take their queen, this pawn is pinned again, this time with the bishop instead of the queen. So once again, we will just take their knight. And if they take back, then we will just take their queen, and now we're just up a piece, or in this position, a queen. But back here, we'll be just, up a piece and completely win. For trap number 38, we have the Tennison Gambit Trap, or more commonly known as the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Gambit Trap. It comes after pawn to e4 by white, and black plays pawn to d5, the Scandinavian defense, and we play knight to f3. Gambiting our e-pawn, they're going to take it, and now we play knight to g5. Attacking the e-pawn, black will play knight to f6, just defending it, and we play pawn to d3. They're going to take it, and we take back our bishop, setting up an x-ray against our queen. That becomes very important. Black here sees this knight and doesn't, really like it, so they will play pawn to h6, just saying, get it out of there, move back, and I will just be cleanly up a pawn. However, we are completely winning here with the move, knight takes on f7. Obviously, this is a fork of their queen and rook, so they can't just, move away or ignore it or something. They have to take it, and now we play bishop to g6. Now we're opening up this discovered attack against their queen and checking their king at the same time, and their king would ordinarily be able to run back and defend, but they can't now because the bishop covers this entire corridor. So they have to take our bishop, at which point we simply take their queen and are up a queen for 2 pieces and are completely winning. The only thing you have to be careful in these positions for is if they ever move their e-pawn up, like pawn to e5 here, make sure you do not let them get a check with this bishop. Like, for example, the very normal move, bishop to e3 here, is a complete blunder that blunders the game away because bishop to b4. Now they check our king and get this discovered attack against our queen. So after we block with c3, they will simply take our queen, and after we take their bishop, we're actually just down a lot of material here. So in a position like this, what you would do is simply castle or play, c3, bishop to d2, just something to make sure they don't have this check. For trap number 39, we have the Thornton Castling Trap. It comes after pawn to e4 by white, and black plays pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense. We will play knight to f3, they'll play pawn to d6, and we respond pawn to d4, striking in the center. They will take it, we take it back, but not with our knight, we take back with our queen. This is known as the Chekhov variation, but it is perfectly fine for white. They will play knight to c6, attacking our queen, and we play bishop to b5, attacking their knight and pinning it to their king, bishop to d7, undoing the pin. We will take it, and they will trade with their b-pawn. Now this opens up for the rook to go to b8 and attack somewhere on this b file here, so we will play knight to c3, knight to f6, and bishop to g5, attacking their knight. They will play rook to b8 now, attacking this b2 pawn, and we do not care about it. We play pawn to e5. They will take it, and we take it back with our knight, and now they will take our b2 pawn. And black here will just say, hey, I'm just up a pawn, you have nothing for it. But here we play the move, bishop takes on f6, taking their knight. They will take back, we take their bishop, obviously they take back, and now we take their queen, they take back, and if only we could both have our rook on d1, checking their king, at the same time as our king being on c1 to attack their rook. Oh wait, I know, long castle completely wins. We check their king, at the same time we attack their rook, so they have to move over, and now we simply take the rook, and we're just up a rook here, and complete. And finally, for trap number 40, we have the Würzburger Trap for white. It comes after pawn to e4, black plays pawn to e5, and we play knight to c3 here, the Vienna opening. Excuse me. They will play knight to f6, and the Falkbeer variation. No, I did not say a bad word. And here we play pawn to f4, the Vienna Gambit, and black plays the most critical response, pawn to d5, counter-striking in the center, and after we take their e-pawn with our f-pawn, they will take our e-pawn with their knight. Here we play the move, pawn to d3, attacking their knight, and black here will be, completely fine if they simply take our knight. We'll take back, and this is a more or less even position. However, black here might see a tactic and think that they are winning. Black here might play queen to h4 check. Now we only have two legal moves in this position, pawn to g3 and king to e2. If king to e2, then queen to f2 is checkmate, so obviously that's not an option. We have to play pawn to g3. But can't they just take that with their knight? And, you know, we can't take back because then we lose our bishop, and then their knight is attacking this rook, and how could this possibly be good for us? But I promise you, we are actually winning in this position. We play the move knight to f3, attacking this queen, so if they just try to take a rook, then we can just take their queen, and, you know, we're just completely winning. But the thing here is black must stay on this h-file, because that's the only reason we cannot take this knight. It's because the queen here is pinning. So their only square to stay on this h-file is a move queen to h5, and now we simply play knight takes on d5. We are going to attack this fork here, which would win an extra pawn, and meanwhile we are also nabbing an extra d-pawn in the center as well. Here they only have two options that are really any good according to the engine, which is to take our rook or to play bishop to g4 and attack our knight. I'll start with if they take a rook, then we'll simply play knight takes on c7, taking an extra pawn as well as getting a fork here. So after their king moves and we take the rook, we are just up a pawn in this position, and you might be thinking, oh well, isn't this bad because our knight is trapped? But the thing you have to remember is that their knight at the opposite end of the board is also trapped, so imagine that both these knights are off the board, we would simply be up a pawn. The other thing that they can do is, back here, is bishop to g4. Now we cannot allow them to take this knight because then they would get this and we would actually be losing. So instead we play the move bishop to d2, protecting this, and we're threatening to take this knight now because the bishop protects the rook, so they have to take our rook, and now we get a very similar position. Knight takes on c7, king walks, we take the rook, and we get pretty much the exact same position, except here we have our bishop out. And one of the nice things about this position is, first of all, we're up a pawn, so we're already better, but also after they play knight c6, the best move, we can afford to be slow in these positions. We can play a more slower move here, pawn to d4. You know, protecting this pawn because it was hanging before, because remember the knight can't take because it is pinned. So we can just simply play pawn to d4, nice slow move, and we can take our time in this position. We are eventually going to win this knight. If black blunders and lets our knight get out, that's always going to be great for us. And yeah, we're just up a pawn and a little bit better, maybe not completely winning, but definitely better in this position. So that is the end of this video. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff, and I will see you next time. Have a fantastic day.